Android eats Chrome, Microsoft recommends Windows 10, and Google can make people you hate disappear. Tech News Tonight is next.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Tonight, episode 456 for Thursday, October 29th, 2015. This episode is brought to you by Braintree. Looking to set up payments for your business? Braintree gives your app or website a payment solution that accepts just about every payment method with one simple integration. Plus, Braintree will give you the first $50,000 in transactions fee-free. To learn more, visit BraintreePayments.com/TechNight. Welcome, I'm Megan Maroney. Let's get to the tech news. The Wall Street Journal reports that Google is planning to fold the web-only Chrome operating system into Android. The merger is on tap for 2017, but has apparently been in the works for 2 years. People familiar with the matter say that Chromebooks will get a new name, but people familiar with the matter were not yet familiar with that new name. For some, this Android-Chrome combo does not come as a surprise. Google CEO Sundar Pichai was put in charge of Android and Chrome back in 2013, and Hiroshi Lockheimer has been overseeing both Android and Chrome since last year. With Windows 10 already running across mobile and desktops as a unified OS, this leaves Apple as the remaining holdout with a separate operating system on PCs versus phones and tablets. And speaking of Windows 10, Microsoft VP of Windows and Devices said today that the company plans to make it even easier to get their newest OS. Owners of more than 110 million devices have upgraded already by responding to those pop-up warnings, encouraging them to upgrade. And although Terry Myerson said Microsoft still wants you to be able to choose to upgrade or decline the offer, they do plan to give you a little extra nudge in that direction. Soon, Microsoft will begin listing Windows 10 as an optional update within Windows Update, and then early next year, it will become a recommended update. And that means when Microsoft flips that switch, anyone who has automatic updates set to download and install all recommended updates will be upgraded to Windows 10. Now, Myerson told The Verge that users will see a dialogue asking them if they would like to install Windows 10 or not. Windows 10 is a free upgrade for genuine users of Windows 7 and 8.1, and Microsoft is also making it easier for non-genuine users, also sometimes known as pirates. They can upgrade with a one click. They can just buy a genuine license in order to upgrade. Kentucky's drone slayer has been cleared of all charges. You might remember the story we reported this summer of William H. Meredith, a man who used his registered 12-gauge shotgun to take down a quadcopter that was flying over his property line. When the drone owner came to retrieve the quadcopter, Meredith allegedly recommended that they not come on his property or, quote, there would be another shooting. Meredith was arrested and charged with criminal mischief, but now Slate reports that all charges against the drone slayer have been dismissed. Interesting choice, and certainly it's bound to be a landmark case and one that we're sure to see a lot more of, as experts expect 1 million more drones to be delivered by Santa's sleigh this holiday season, unless someone shoots the sleigh out of the sky for trespassing. Last week, we told you about a technical glitch that left owners of the prepaid debit card's Rush card without access to their money. Today, hip-hop mogul Russell Simmons, owner and creator of Rush Card, said the company has created a multi-million-dollar fund to compensate customers. Simmons says they will act as quickly as regulators will allow and are already doing so on a case-by-case basis. Coming up, Georgia Dow is here to explain the psychology behind online harassment. But first, this episode is brought to you by Braintree, code for easy mobile payments. Maybe you're working on the next Uber, Airbnb, or GitHub. Why not use the same simple payment solution that helped them become what they are today? Braintree makes mobile payments so fast, easy, and seamless, it's almost magical. Add it to your app with just a few lines of code, and you're instantly ready to accept Apple Pay, Android Pay, PayPal, Venmo, credit cards, even Bitcoin. And if some other way to pay comes along, Braintree will support that too. Braintree's fast payouts and continuous support means you'll always be ready, whether you're earning your first dollar or your billionth. See fewer abandoned carts and more sales with Braintree's best-in-class mobile checkout experience. Braintree gives you a full-stack payment solution, support for all payment types for your customers, single integration across all platforms with superior fraud protection, customer service, and fast payouts. To check it out for yourself, visit BraintreePayments.com/TechNight. All this week, we've been talking about the evil specter of GamerGate that has risen from the dead just in time for Halloween. The spring tech conference South by Southwest canceled 2 panels on the topic after receiving threats of on-site violence. One panel has been reinstated, and the imposing panelists say they are planning to host it themselves. Meanwhile, there have been reports that the conference plans a day-long seminar on online harassment to better understand the topic. To help us understand this very confusing topic, we've invited Georgia Dow, psychotherapist, gamer, and senior editor at iMore. Welcome back, Georgia.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So I know this is probably hard, but can you explain GamerGate in 2 minutes or less?
I will do my best in 2 minutes or less. So, like, GamerGate is a phenomenon of when you end up with a small group of people that feel marginalized and not accepted by the greater society, you can end up with this feeling of in-group, out-group, and so you become very exclusionary. And so people for GamerGate were like, these are gamers that liked the way life was. They liked their games not being changed. They didn't want to include female characters. They didn't want to have female gamers. They liked the world the way that they had it. And so you can see this in lots of different fields. It's happened through sports, it happens in politics, it happens in business. And then when other parties try to change the way that life has been for them in a way that would be more inclusive, they see it as a personal threat and then react highly strongly.
So this hashtag or this movement or whatever you might call it, it happened about a year ago is when it started, when it flared up first. So did one thing happen, or were there a lot of things happen? How did it get started?
So we'll start off with one of the basics, and there was many different things, but I'll just for time. Anita Sarkeesian was making videos on, women in games and how we were portrayed and how that kind of excluded half of the audience of people that would be gamers. And people started to become aware that games are not always being the best reflection of our culture. And so that was relatively well taken by some people, but people that play a lot of games were angry because she was saying that there's something wrong with something they love and that it should be changed so that it is more reflective of the culture we would like to live at. And so that was kind of the impetus, the start of, listen, how do you treat women in games? And the way that we see things in our media does change the way that we see ourselves. So if your culture is constantly portrayed as a thug or a miscreant or does things wrong, that does change how you see yourself. And so it was really important to people to have games be reflective and to have female characters and to not always be the one that's being rescued so that you can also feel empowered. But changing something that people have liked a certain way and it worked for them can make people feel very threatened.
And so there was a lot of harassment. Many women who stood up for this cause were just doxxed, like had their address put out online. They were harassed on Twitter, harassed, anywhere they went online, threatened. Was there any actual physical violence? I know that threatening and having your address and your privacy violated is all just as horrible. But was there any face-to-face violence, or was this all online?
There have been people that have come up to certain people that I even know and that have been very aggressive and very rude and have what they're trying to do is they're trying to stop people from discussing this in hopes that we're not going to change. And someone stands up and says, this is not okay, and I think that we should do things differently, they are trying to make sure that we don't have these discussions because they don't want anything to change in their world. And so it can get very heated when people have a belief set that they hold very strongly and someone else says that that might not be right and there might be a better way to do it. It's almost as if you are physically being threatened. And so people react very limbically, so very with anger or avoidance. And so it became exceptionally aggressive, really quite dark. And it's all because of just a way of let's do this a little bit differently. But for people that are, consider themselves gamergaters, it was like a personal threat to their own ecosystem and the way that their culture and their belief system.
So sometimes you hear GamerGate represented as the ethics in online and gaming journalism movement.
Right.
Where does that come from?
Well, I think that whenever you are going to be doing something, and I think that in some ways people truly believe that what they're trying to do is make games be more honest. But there's definitely a disjoint. You end up with something called cognitive dissonance, and that's when you have two opposing belief systems in your mind and they don't fit. And so you try to give a valid argument even though really what it comes down to is that you don't want things to change. So there, we could talk about, I think that everyone thinks that, games and journalism in gaming should be more ethical and we should deal with it. I don't think that there's any real argument there. Everyone's on board with making games better. But if that was the case, then they wouldn't be going after primarily female or pro-inclusive gamers and journalists. They would be going after big companies that sponsor their games or that, pay people in order to be, reviewing things. And that's not what happened. And so you can tell that there's a huge disjoint, because if that's really what they wanted, they would not be targeting the people that they are targeting right now. And so that kind of pulls the blanket off, and we can see, what's really happening behind the machine.
So there were these two panels at South by Southwest that were going to happen. One, the Level Up panel, was talking about online harassment, talking about this topic. And then there was this sort of pro-GamerGate. It didn't have GamerGate in the title of the panel,
right,
but I think it was ethics and online journalism, and that they were seen as pro-GamerGate and anti-GamerGate. And then South by Southwest got a lot of threats of violence. There was some talk about the fact that they didn't even really understand having these women on the panelists. They were going to need to have protection for them, and they didn't even really understand that, I guess. But then their decision was just to cancel both panels at first. That was their decision. Why do you think they did that?
Right. Well, I think that they were scared. I think that people, if you're not used to what's happening, so, you're frightened and you don't want anything bad to happen and you don't want to have to deal with it. And so the easier thing is just kind of to cut and leave it. I was going to say cut and run, but that seems very, well, it's kind of what they did. They decided, like, we're not even going to deal with this. We're not going to handle it. And so we're going to, stop both panels. But in the end, that means that the people that are harassing them in the first place win. And there's a huge issue when you allow people to bully you into taking a position. It reinforces that bullying, because now we're not having the really important discussions that we need to in order to make everyone feel safe and comfortable in a forum. And so it's really sad that that was the choice that they took. But I think that without education and discussing things, that was probably the easiest thing for them to do. And they probably do not understand the issues at hand as well as they should have before they even decided to undertake this.
Right. So that we should say they've reinstated the Level Up panel. There was one Recode story about how they're going to have a whole day devoted to understanding online harassment. I haven't heard anything more about that. But I mean, in some ways, it's kind of like we're like, GamerGate again. But it's good that we're talking about it. I mean, it's good that we're having the opportunity to talk about this exists, that women are harassed. It's mostly younger women, and it's mostly women, even though men talk about this a lot. Talk about, that they're, against GamerGate. They're not the ones getting harassed. So it's like you said.
Yeah.
So it's good to be able to talk about this.
It's good, and it's so incredible that, like, at least now we are having these discussions. At least now, like a year ago, I don't think that I really looked at, or even when I played video games, I didn't truly think about the take that women were shown in these games. I just expected it as that's the way that things are, and that's the way that things are going to be. And so, though this is a hard point in society, it's a very dark point in society. I think that we have to commend the people that are standing up, having discussions, even though they're going through such an onslaught of horrible, constant harassment. And at least we're having these discussions because they do change culture. And now I play a video game and other people play video games, and I can hear them saying, you know what, like, how many women are actually represented, and are they talking to each other? And the same thing for movies, and the same thing in technology. And so, though I think that this is the dark period, I think that it is the storm that's going to come before the calm of us noticing that this really does matter, and we need to do more education, more diversity, and more discussions, just like what we're having right now.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that in some ways it's the medium that makes the online harassment so easy. I mean, I know that this has always been around, but when I was at Tech TV and, my friend Morgan Webb was the host of the gaming show, and I mean, she got a lot of email just that was sexist, like telling her how beautiful she was, like treating her like an object.
Right.
But she didn't get this kind of hate. I mean, she just didn't, not on a regular basis, unless she hid it and never told anyone, which I don't think. But I mean, I just think it's so much easier now to lash out to people than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, so I think that one was anonymity. People on the web, there's no face behind this. This you can do pretty much with impunity and get away with it. And so I think that that's one big issue. And the second is that Morgan wasn't actually saying, I want things to change. She was just a voice in the forum. And so she wasn't saying that we're going to change the status quo. And so that was not something she was not a threat in and of herself. She was in the space, which is slightly threatening probably, but she wasn't exceptionally threatening to that because she didn't want to change things up and let's mix it up and make things a little bit different than what you were used to. And people are we get really anxious with change. We don't like it. Even though we think, oh, I'm really open-minded, I can do many things. We're pattern-oriented. And so even the way that you travel home from work, it's probably almost always the exact same way. We like that, where you sit in, if you go to, if you're attending a class, you probably sit in around the same seat, or you try to. Safety is in the way that things are, and so it can be really threatening and really scary to do things a little bit differently, and some people don't even understand that that's really the base feeling that they're having, where this anger comes from. And I have the same thing happen, I'm sure that you do, that some people will just be angry for no other reason and send you something, and then when I call them out on it, they don't know that on the website that I work from, I have your email. So sometimes I'll type back to be like, well, listen, I'm happy you read the article, but I'm so sorry that you think that I'm hideous to look at. I'm sorry about that. And then they write back to me, I'm so sorry. I didn't know I was having a rough day and I just wanted to lash out at someone. And so I did. And I apologize. I didn't even think that you would read it.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that I have definitely gotten that, where you come back as like, oh yeah, hey, I'm a real person, and sometimes that works.
Yes,
sometimes
that works. But GamerGate is a little different. This is it's a fanaticism, so it's not even just the person that's writing out. This is purposeful. It is targeted. They have an agenda, and they want to quiet down people's voices, and that's why they target so strongly in hopes that people will be scared, or they'll target even the supporters or the funding for projects in order to control their other people's behavior. And so I have to say it takes a lot of bravery to be able to stand up to that.
Well, Georgia, thank you so much, as always, for your perspective. Georgia Dow is a senior editor at iMore and at Georgia _Dow on Twitter. Thanks so much for being on.
Thank you for having me.
Take care.
Bye.
And finally, never underestimate the power of Google. Now the company can make all your exes disappear from Google Photos, that is. In the new version of Google Photos for Android, you can use facial recognition to block all images that contain certain people that you'd prefer not to see again. They won't appear in the people section or the rediscover the day feature. Unfortunately, Google is not yet able to erase the memories you have of those people in your actual brain, but maybe that's next. And that is it for this edition of Tech News Tonight. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/Tech News Tonight. I try to post the stories that we talk about during the day, and you can comment on them. You can also subscribe to this show at twit.tv/TN2. Write to us at TN2@twit.tv and watch live every weekday at 4 p.m. Pacific. And don't miss our morning news program, Tech News Today, every weekday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm Megan Maroney. Thanks for watching.
Bandwidth for Tech News Tonight is brought to you by Cashfly.com.